Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Matt Romero, Executive Director of the MWRA Advisory Board, and welcome to Episode 4 of ABTV. Today, we're diving into an incredibly timely topic, the evolving landscape of lead and copper regulations and what it means for our communities. This episode features a workshop hosted by the Massachusetts Water Resources Authority and the MWRA Advisory Board, recorded live on October 24th, 2024. We called it From Inventory to Implementation, Lead and Copper Rule Community Forum. The workshop was all about helping water professionals navigate the latest updates in lead and copper regulations, from initial inventory requirements to practical strategies for full lead service line replacement. With over 125 people registered for the workshop, we wanted to make sure this valuable information was available both for those who attended and for those who couldn't make it. With the new regulations under the Lead and Copper Rule Improvements, LCRI, just finalized, and key upcoming deadlines under the Lead and Copper Rule Revisions, LCRR, there's never been a more important time for our communities to act swiftly to protect public health, avoid added costs, and work towards removing lead from our drinking water systems to ensure no one is left behind. You'll hear from a fantastic group of experts from both MWRA as well as the City of Framingham as they share insights on compliance best practices, funding opportunities for lead service line replacements, and communication strategies communities can use. Stay tuned, and keep in mind that while this is a podcast, this particular episode includes a lot of visuals that are available on the YouTube version, so you may want to check that out for a richer experience. Whether you're catching us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform, let's get into it.
All right. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to today's workshop, and a special thanks to MWRA staff for partnering with us to make this event possible. With over 125 registered attendants, we ask that you please keep your microphones muted unless you have a question to help us minimize background noise. Your cooperation on that is appreciated. It's a large group today, so we're really excited about that. So before handing things over to MWRA, I'd like to take a moment to introduce the advisory board. So Steve, if you can go to our next slide. I'm Matt Romero. I'm the executive director of the MWRA Advisory Board, and we represent 60 communities served by the MWRA and their ratepayers. Our role is to be a productive partner to the MWRA when we can be, and a constructive critic when we need to be. Today is one of those times that we are very, very pleased to be a productive partner by hosting this event. If you could go to the next slide, Steve, just a few little PSAs because I do have the floor. We recently launched a podcast called ABTV. Some of you may have listened to our episode on the lead and copper rule in preparation for this workshop. If you haven't, we encourage you to check it out. Our podcast is available on all major platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. So feel free to subscribe on your preferred app if there's one that you use. You can also scan this QR code on the screen to get access to our main landing page on our website for all our podcasts. Please note that this workshop is being recorded and it will be released as an upcoming podcast episode next week. We named the series ABTV because some episodes like this one include visual content and will be available on YouTube if you want to go back and revisit it as a resource in the future. The next up here, thanks Steve for moving forward. This is just along with the podcast launch, we relaunched our social media accounts. We'd love for you to connect with us there and stay updated on our latest developments. We decided to open today's workshop to communities beyond the MWRA's network because, as you'll see on the next slide, Steve, as those in the water and wastewater field know, it takes a village to tackle these challenges. There's no monopoly on good ideas, and with the new lead and copper rule requirements, sharing lessons learned is more important than ever. So we really hope that this workshop will foster these connections and exchanges that we can all use to adapt to these new requirements. And if you want to move forward there, Steve, thank you. Oh, I'd also be remiss if I didn't throw it out there that if you are an MWRA community, in an MWRA community, work for one, and you don't think your community is represented, we would love to have you on our board. So please reach out to us and we can talk you through the commitment and the process to get appointed to the advisory board. Lastly, on this slide here, we have some URLs to our website, different resources that we have on there, and the QR code will take you to our link tree, which is where our Northeastern co-op tells me all the kids put social media links these days, so you can connect with us on your preferred platform. I'd like to point out that Christine, Nate, and Corrine from my team, they will be helping us manage the Zoom today. So if you have any issues, please don't hesitate to reach out to us and we'll try to help you either in the chat or via email. So thank you. And with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Lisa.
Yeah. Good morning. Thank you, Matt. My name is Lisa Bean. I'm the Deputy Director of Waterworks, and I'd like to thank everyone for participating in this forum. I'd like to also welcome any non-MWRA communities to this forum. We hope you find this helpful, and we're glad to provide another opportunity for you to learn about what's new in all things lead. MWRA and the Advisory Board have collaborated on this training on lead, and they've also collaborated on other water and sewer system issues over the years. Today is just another example of the partnership between MWRA and other member communities. We're happy to offer technical assistance and, as you'll hear, improve financial assistance on this critical issue. Next slide, please. Now, here are some logistical kind of topics that we go over every time we have a virtual meeting like this. And we've gotten pretty good at this since the pandemic. But as Matt said, could everyone please mute themselves and raise your hand if you have questions, or you could use the chat function. We'll be keeping an eye on it. And we'd love for this to be interactive. Add your experiences, questions as we go along. And like I said, we will be keeping an eye on that chat. Now, we will be providing TCHs for this forum. It's 1.5 TCHs, so it's very important that everyone puts their name and affiliation and email address in the chat. That's what we use to make sure everyone receives the TCHs. Now, at the very end, we have to have review questions, so please don't jump off of the forum or the meeting right away, because we do have review questions to go over. And if anyone would like a copy of the slides, they can be provided after the forum. Next slide, please.
And we will make sure we post these to our website as well, if that makes it easy.
We have a lot to cover in this hour and a half. You know most of the presenters, but I am going to run through who they are. Now, most of you know Steve Smagiazzi. He's the Director of Planning and Sustainability and MWRA's subject matter expert on all things lead. Now, Kristen Hall is the Senior Program Manager of Community Support. She leads up all of MWRA's community, technical, and especially financial support programs. Claudia Baptista is a project manager in that group of the community support program, and many of you know her from her work on the water programs. Now, Dave Granados is also here. He was recently promoted to program manager for the lead replacement grant loan program. And we have a special guest speaker, Stephanie Tarvers from Framingham, who will be sharing her experiences on one aspect of the inventory process. We're always glad to have speakers from our member communities to provide more of on-the-ground experience. And at the end, like it says on the slide, I'll be kind of spearheading the question and answers at the end that are important to stay on with. Next slide, please. And at this point, I'm going to be turning it over to Steve to lead off the presentations.
Okay. Thank you, Lisa.
Just really quickly, Steve, one logistical thing. Down at the bottom of that screen, if you could click the hide button, you see how it says stop sharing or hide? Just it was blocking some of your words, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't know that. So this is one of the fun things we all experience, is each one of our communities uses a different platform. Those of us at MWRA are familiar with WebEx, and we're experts at it. Well, mostly experts. So what's going on with lead and copper rule, and where are we headed to now? I'm going to do a few slides on this and then turn it over to some of the substantive comment. So what we'd really like to accomplish today is to look at what's due in October of 2024 and where you need to be headed over the next couple of years. I do want to congratulate the fact that all of our communities did submit their initial lead service line inventory to Mass DEP by last week on the 16th. Massachusetts, by the way, had the highest state participation. 99.7% of public water systems in Massachusetts submitted on time. Only Guam was better at 100%, but I think we'll be happy with 99.7. We would like, if you could provide us a summary of your inventory, that would be great. We'll be working with DEP to get some stuff from them, but if you want to email our team, Kristen, Dave, or Claudia, with your summary of your inventory, we'd love to see that. The next thing we all need to be worrying about, and we'll spend a bunch of time talking about that, is the fact that you need to mail letters to everybody with a lead service line, a galvanized requiring replacement. We'll define that during the course of the presentation, or an unknown service line. And those all need to be done, delivered to the customers by November 15th. And then for those of you who are not part of the Metro Boston sampling program and who have been practicing on some of the new requirements over the last couple of years, every community nationwide is now going to need to do a public 24-hour public notice if they're above the action level of 15. So we'll talk a little bit about that for those of you who haven't yet had to do that. And then finally, we'll talk about the fact that everything else that you heard about in the LCRR, lead and copper rule revisions, has been deferred until 2027, but it's a good plan to start practicing some of those things. So what was in the improvements, which EPA released just a couple weeks ago, and we expect them to be read in the Federal Register any day now. The new requirements, effective mostly after 2027, include lowering the action level to 10 parts per billion, the fact that everybody needs to replace their lead service lines basically as soon as possible, but no later than 10 years, almost no exceptions to that. There'll be changes in our sampling and our reporting protocols, both of which will tend to raise the reported lead levels. Systems that exceed the action level, the new action level of 10, will need to review their corrosion control and re-optimize it, make changes to treatment. There is an option that some of you have heard us talk about to not do the corrosion control changes if you're able to replace your lead service lines more quickly. And there are changes to the school and child care sampling. Some of this you've heard about previously in trainings we've been doing over the last several years. We'll touch on topics today on all of those, but we do anticipate that we'll be doing additional training in the next couple of years on the specifics of things that will be required after 2027, particularly after we get better guidance from EPA. Before we really dive into the particulars, I always like to be able to say, why are we doing what we do? What's the whole point of all this? Why do we care? As water suppliers, we are in the public health business. We do know that children's blood levels have come down by 90% since the 1970s when some of us were kids, but still not zero. Lead levels at our customer taps have dropped dramatically. You can see that chart there, but they're still not as close to zero as we'd like them. And so there's more to be done. We got to keep striving to achieve better results. And by we, I really mean all of us, because dealing with lead is a shared responsibility. To meet those long-term goals of reducing corrosion and removing lead from contact with water, we all need to work together. MWRA's principal role is to do corrosion control, effective corrosion control. Communities need to work on removing lead service lines, get that lead out of contact with the water, and keep the public informed. Our residents, our customers, need to cooperate with the lead service line replacement, and there are things they can do in their homes to reduce their lead levels in the meantime. And then we need to work with our health professionals to make sure that we're doing effective risk communication, because it's not just about water, it's also about lead and paint and lead and dust and lead and soil. We have a part to play, but we're not the only one. So having said the why, let's talk about some of the what's now. So Kristen Hall is up next to talk about those letters that need to go out in the next several weeks.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kristen Hall. I am the Senior Program Manager in the Planning Department, and I manage our community support programs. So I'm going to be talking about notification today. So first off, who do you need to notify? That would be all customers that have service lines that have been identified as lead, galvanized requiring replacement, or unknown materials. And all customers means homeowners and residents if they're not the same person. You will also need to provide notification to new customers at the time they activate their service. Next, when? By November 15th, everyone who has one of those that I just listed, lead, galvanized requiring replacement, or unknown service connection, must receive a notification by November 15th. And again, any new customers when they activate their service. How are you going to make those notifications? By US mail or by hand or direct delivery to the occupant and to the owner of the property if they're not the same person, or they can be delivered by an alternative method that's approved by DEP. If you want to use an alternative method such as email, you need written approval from DEP beforehand. And for how long? Until the service line is no longer lead, galvanized requiring replacement, or unknown. Next slide. So we anticipate that there's going to be a lot of national and local press coverage about lead service lines, and much of it could paint water systems to be the bad guys, that you're not moving quickly enough to eliminate them. Be prepared to tell your story. Tell everyone about the progress you've already made and what your plan is going forward. Get your story out there in advance of press coverage. You can help shift the public's view of how things are going, and it gives you an opportunity to tell your story the way you want rather than sounding defensive. If you wait till after you the press coverage, and you want to get your staff ready to respond to questions, because as you can imagine, people are going to be concerned when they see this news and wonder, what does this mean for me? You need to have your plan in place, but you need to be able to answer questions too. Homeowners and residents are going to think, is my drinking water safe? What are we doing about it? When is this going to be resolved? So your staff needs to be ready to answer those types of questions. So jumping over to the notifications themselves, you have some rules you need to follow. So I'm not going to read this paragraph, but this is required language. You cannot change a single word in this paragraph. It needs to go in your notification exactly the way that it's written. And on the next slide, you'll also find that on the templates on the DEP and the EPA website. Next slide, there's a list of required topics. So this is all to help people reduce their exposure to lead while they're waiting to no longer have a lead or an unknown or galvanized requiring replacement. To run the water to flush out the lead. Don't use hot water from the tap, especially when you're preparing baby formula. You want to explain to them that you can't remove the lead by boiling water. Encourage them to clean out their faucet aerators regularly. Get a certified filter that will help remove the lead. If they have children, suggest that the parents have their child's blood tested for lead just to be safe, and tell consumers how to get their own water tested. Now on to the templates themselves. So I know you can't read this, but this is a Mass DEP template for a lead notification. Their galvanized requiring replacement template looks very similar to this, so we just put this one up. You can see in the red boxes, the first box, that red box is the required language piece. The next box is the required topics that we just ran through. Then there's some other pieces that are optional that you may want to include. Their links to at the bottom are for the lead and for the galvanized requiring replacement templates. If you get these slides after the presentation, you can just click on those right there. The next one is for an unknown notification level. So you'll see the red circle has a QR code. So residents or homeowners can scan that, and it'll take them right to EPA's website where they have a lead service line self-identification tool to help you with your inventory, and the link to this one is also at the bottom of the page. The next slide is the EPA template. So again, you'll see the red box with the required language paragraph and then all the required topics, and a link to all of their templates is below. The next page is for their unknown template. This one doesn't have the QR code, but it has a link to that self-identification tool right there. We would suggest, if you can, to just stick with the DEP template, because if you want to change any language at all, DEP is requiring you to get permission to do so at least 2 weeks before your notifications go out. So you're kind of running out of time if you want to change anything. But if you do want to add some language on your own, we have some suggestions on the next slide. You want to talk about your own program. Tell them your situation, tell your story, get it out there, and offer your recipients something to do. They can use that self-identification tool to help confirm your inventory. They can schedule their lead service line replacement, and they can run through that list of things to do to reduce their risk until the replacement is complete. A special note on the next slide about multifamily dwellings and notifications. So for multifamilies, whether it's a 3-family or a multi-unit building, owners need to notify all the residents individually, or they need to post a notification in a visible location where everybody can see it. And the public water system should request verification that that gets done. And then DEP on their website, I was in it the other day, they have a great Q&A section with lots of useful information, links to all their templates. And I think that link down below is a link to their Q&A page. So next up, Claudia is going to be talking about your website and what should be on there. And as part of that, I just wanted to throw this out there. Maybe put some of your answers to your questions, do a little FAQ section out there. How do you know what my service line's made of? I think what to do if they think you're wrong. People are going to question why they didn't get a letter. And so we put a little link on here to Fairfax Water. They did a nice little bit about, if you didn't get a letter, this is why section. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Claudia, and she's going to talk about what's next.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks, Kristen. So like Kristen said, we're going to move on to what's on your website. After you send these letters, you want to have as much information as you can. So your service line inventory is complete. Congratulations. Now what? So this is just a little agenda. I'm going to talk about a lot of different things, but essentially what's required you post publicly, what we recommend you communicate, continued improvement going from initial to baseline inventory, and then we'll hear from Stephanie Tarvez from the City of Framingham. All right, so all systems must make their inventory available to the public. That can be a list, a table, a map, as long as you delineate what service materials on the public and the private side and make that available to your customers. Systems greater than 50,000 must post it online. Of course, we recommend everyone do so if you have the means. But yeah, you have to post that online and then make sure that information is also on your CCR, the annual water quality report. Let everyone know how to get to it. And then if you have no lead in your system or galvanizer unknowns, you can post that statement that's been approved by DEP that certifies you have no lead in your system. That must also be made publicly available. Next slide, please. All right, so we're just going to go through some examples. This is a lovely map from the town of Reading. And as you can see, all the blue dots are non-lead classifications of service lines. And then once you click on one, they have it differentiated between the utility service is cement lined here and then the customer. And they've even gone one step further to showcase that there's also a lead connector. Next slide, please. We also have examples of lists. If you want to post a list, these communities posted a PDF on the top, and then we have a spreadsheet that was downloadable on their website. And I would just suggest here that you make it clear to your customers what each abbreviation is. I know we've been looking at this for years, but like Kristen said, you want to make everything clear to your customers. And now what we recommend you include on your website. You're sending these letters and the next line of defense is your website. So you want to put as much information as you can expand on from those letters. Of course, your inventory, you want to have contact information. I think it'd be wonderful if you keep a list of frequently asked questions that, a lot of questions that are coming in, post that on your website so everyone's on the same page. You can also put your plans. I know some communities have posted their phased construction plans, letting everyone know what they've done and what they plan on doing. And of course, our goal for completing our replacements by 2032 would be a great addition. You might want to consider adding a dashboard, having quantitative numbers, letting people know how much lead is actually in your system and how much you've replaced. This map from Pittsburgh Water and Sewer is a nice example of how you can expand on your map Of course, if you zoom in, it has each individual service line, but this visual is nice because it just shows the replacement areas, kind of where they've completed some replacements, where there's some active work, and where they plan on going next. Another lovely example from Denver Water. This dashboard is great because it illustrates a lot of different progress they've done. Not only does it show how many they've replaced, but it also shows a number of communication and outreach that they've done within the community. And a lot of different graphics. I think, you want to adhere to everyone's different kind of visual learning, and also be proud of yourself for the progress you have done. Next slide, please. Oh, and educational resources, of course. Like I said, you just want to expand on whatever information you included in your letter. Not only have you told them how they can replace it, but letting them know also why it's important that we're tackling this issue now. All right, so now let's jump into going from your initial inventory to your baseline inventory. So you just submitted your initial inventory this month, and that kind of determined the state of your system. And now 3 years from now, for the LCRI, you have to submit your baseline inventory. That's October 2027. And this is important because this will set your replacement rates. And we'll go through some examples, but essentially I want to note that the unknown service materials will greatly impact your replacement planning. So scenario number one is a situation where we have no unknowns. So we have a system where there's 2,000 lead services, 1,000 galvanized requiring replacements, giving a total replacement pool of 3,000 services, giving a 20% replacement rate, because that's our 5-year goal, 2027 to 2032. That gives you a 600 goal, a replacement of 600 service lines to replace per year. Comparing that to a situation in scenario number 2, in which there's 3,000 unknowns, that has now doubled your total replacement pool. So you're going from 600 to 1,200 replacements per year simply because you have too many unknowns. And verifications of unknowns, like once you verify an unknown to non-lead, that doesn't even count. So you really want to work on those unknowns. And then one last example is a situation where your unknowns are greater than what you verified to be lead. Here we have 500 lead, 200 galvanized services requiring replacement, and 4,000 unknowns. That gives you 4,700 total replacement pool at 20% replacement rate. That's 940 services you have to replace per year. And this kind of is a situation where you shoot yourself in the foot because 940 is greater than what you've already verified to be lead and galvanized. So this is just one more example of too many unknowns are going to give you an unachievable replacement rate. So the whole point of this is just to remind you that you're continuously improving your inventory, you're identifying, you're replacing, and you're updating your inventory. Now I want to jump into strategies for eliminating your unknowns. If you guys could, throw in the chat, how is your city or town identifying the materials that you're unaware of yet? I'd love to hear and share a little bit. Of course, we've talked about customer self-identification. Your water quality test can determine kind of where you want to do some more investigations. Potholing, I know a lot of communities are doing that. And just remember to take pictures. The LCRI requires verification methods, and you want to keep good records, not just for the regulatory, but also for your own staff. There's a lot of turnover all the time, and you just want to make sure you're doing the best you can. Yes, I see someone saying they're doing home inspections. If you offer that, make sure you put that on your website so people can reach out to you. Test pits, that's always a great, visual inspection. So make sure your staff is as involved as possible. Meter replacements, that's a good one I hear a lot. That's a chance to get into your customer's home. Doing test pits and meter replacements, yeah, so that's great. Thank you for sharing, guys. And if you can go to your next slide, please. Yeah, and just to wrap it up, there's some examples of how you can involve your customers. Malden, it has this nice flyer that's already translated in multiple languages, which is very mindful of the population. And if you have a QR code, you can just scan and it takes them right to the survey in which they can fill out all the information on what material is their service line. And then we also have Mass DEP provides this public outreach toolkit. And these are two great visuals. They have many, many more that you can kind of customize and have your customers not only identify the pipe, but then also share that information with you. So crowdsourcing is a great way to kind of take the labor off of your staff and engage the customers in the process. And lastly, we have a couple more links. Of course, you guys are getting these slides and we'll have these resources available to you. EPA's Protect Your Tap is a wonderful guide that walks through how to identify the material of your pipe. And then this video from New York's Department of Health also is a great visual to just see the different kind of pipe materials. And then I'll hand it off to Stephanie Tarvez. Thank you so much for listening.
Stephanie, you're still muted.
Did it work this time?
Yes, excellent.
Okay. All right, good. My name is Stephanie Travis. I'm the senior water wastewater engineer for the city of Framingham. We were fortunate to be awarded a grant from the Mass Clean Water Trust in July of 2023. And we began working with a consultant in October 2023 to build our inventory in time for the October 16th deadline this year. It didn't take that long before we were asking ourselves, what exactly is galvanized requiring replacement? What does this mean?
Stephanie, I do apologize. We are getting some having some issues with your mic. I'm not sure if there's a way you can see.
Hold on. Try to.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that any better?
Oh, that's definitely better.
Yeah.
At least on my end.
Yeah.
Mike, does that sound better to you too? I know that you wrote in the chat.
Yeah, sounds better.
It
Okay,
sounds better on
great.
this end too.
Lost Stephanie's picture, but we have her voice better.
Yeah. So unfortunately, you don't get to have a visual, but hopefully the slides will be.
It just went down again.
Yeah, it went back down again.
Okay. See if that.
We could try, can my team grab the link to call in? Pop it in the chat. Maybe Stephanie can call in and use that as her audio.
Is that any better?
We'll try it. Let's just go see how it goes. Speak clearly and loudly.
Okay. All right. I'll try as loud as I can. All right. So it wasn't long before we were asking ourselves, what exactly is galvanized requiring replacement? According to the EPA, galvanized requiring replacement, any galvanized pipe downstream of a lead service. We were greatly relieved to realize, yes, this does not apply to all galvanized pipe in our system. But the next logical question that came up is, what about lead goosenecks? Does that count as an upstream lead? And we reached out to the DEP and got confirmation from them. No, in fact, that does not count as upstream lead. It doesn't trigger a GRR, at least as of now. We don't have to worry about the lead goosenecks. So once we kind of had that figured out, we thought, okay, now we understand what we're looking for. So we have a record where the public side was once lead, the private side is still galvanized. Does that mean that this is a galvanized requiring replacement? We think we got it right. And the answer was, well, not necessarily. So let's get into it. Next slide.
Sorry, Stephanie, I wasn't keeping track with your
Quite all
animation.
right. That's fine.
I'll try and keep up.
I think that's the last one, so don't worry.
Yeah.
So when we got our initial inventory back from our consultant in August 2024, we had 71 galvanized requiring replacement. So we, the city, started looking into exactly what made galvanized requiring replacement in the spreadsheet. So we in the city of Framingham have no known lead services. So none of our galvanized requiring replacement came from a public side lead. Ours were comprised of galvanized services confirmed to have once been downstream of lead, as you can see in the blue, galvanized services that were previously unknown material, even if it's known now. And then galvanized services with the current public side with an unknown service material. Next slide. So the next step after getting our draft inventory from our consultant, we began doing some data scrubbing to confirm our galvanized requiring replacement. We knew that we were going to have to reach out to all of these customers. We wanted to minimize the number of letters that we had to send out. So we started doing some data scrubbing. We looked at which factors in the spreadsheet were contributing to the entire service line classification. And what we realized was, for us, column G, which was public service line material previously lead, was the most impactful to us. And we realized we really had to answer that question accurately. And when we had received this back from our consultants, that was sort of a question that wasn't really given a lot of attention. So we started looking into that. Next slide. So I'll give you some examples here. And just for the record, there's no privacy issues. These are properties that no longer exist in Framingham. So there's no issue with that. So these are two tie cards for the same water service, one original from 1886 and a relay or a replacement from 1906. In this case, though the lead was replaced in 1906, the galvanized iron, or what we realized in our tie cards, iron, GI or GALV, or galvanized, all meant galvanized iron. So that galvanized iron was previously downstream of lead. So this would be a galvanized requiring replacement or service that is a GRR. Okay, so next slide. So here's another similar example. Again, these are two tie cards from the same water service. In this case, the galvanized service was replaced at the same time the public side was replaced in 1927. So this galvanized private side was never downstream of lead. So in this case, while the answer to the question, was this service previously lead? The answer is yes. This is actually not accurately categorized as a galvanized service requiring replacement.
That's because it was already replaced. It was galvanized requiring replacement in 1927, 1920.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
So
exactly.
That's cool.
Right. And this was a very similar example to other ones that we did find in our system. So next slide. So rather than answering the question, was this service previously lead, we answered, was this galvanized pipe ever downstream of lead? And we were able to reduce the number of galvanized requiring replacement in our inventory from 71 to 60 by the mid-October in time for us to submit. So a reduction of just under 16%. So without even putting a shovel to the ground, we were able to eliminate galvanized requiring replacement. So hopefully with this approach, other PWS might be able to revisit their GRRs list and eliminate galvanized requiring replacement without even breaking any ground. Next slide. So thank you. And if you have any questions or you'd like to chat, my contact information is below.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. This is excellent. This is a great example, sort of following on from Claudia's, emphasis on how important it is to deal with unknowns. This is the case where you can actually eliminate galvanized requiring replacement from your inventory. So both of them are ways in which you can sort of get ahead of the future requirements. And Stephanie, thanks for your help here. Okay, so I'll turn it over to me, I guess. I'm going to touch on a couple of topics, and then we'll move to others to deal with some others. One of the things that communities here in the Metro Boston area have been piloting over the last several years has been this new 24-hour public notice for systems that are over the action level. As of last week, this is now effective for all systems. So if you're an MWRA partially supplied community, an MWRA CVA community, one of the few metro communities that was not part of our sampling pool, this now applies to you. And if you're a non-MWRA community, this now applies to you. It's a big deal. This 24-hour notice is something you really do need to be prepared for, or you will not look good if it happens. So what exactly is the requirement? Congress set a new requirement several years back in the WIN Act to say that a lead service line, a lead action level exceedant, an ALE, represents a imminent threat to public health and requires a tier 1 public notice. That's the same kind of public notice that we would do if we found an E. coli. So if your community's 90th percentile is over the action level, you will need to do a 24-hour notice. There's a new template up on DEP's website. It's in the next slide. And that needs to go out in newspaper, other media, reverse 911, things which are designed to immediately alert your customers that some homes in your service area have elevated lead levels. We recommend, DEP and EPA would recommend, but we definitely recommend that you plan ahead for your next sampling round. If you think there's any chance that you might be above the action level, you should make sure that officials in town, the public health, elected officials, know that it's a possibility. Take a look at the template, get ready so that when it happens, you're already primed to go. It's not a surprise. In our lingo here at the MWRA, we occasionally would describe that as an incident, career-altering incident, being surprised by something like this. The trigger for having to do this is when all your sample results are done and your 90th is over the action level. But if you're like a lot of communities, you get all your results at once, that's going to be the trigger right then and there. If you're an MWRA community, we are available to help you out with this. And we do remind you that in addition to that 24-hour public notice, you still need to do the 60-day public education mailing, and there is a new template for that. If you have to do this, it's important to realize that the public notice language using their template must be approved by DEP prior to use. You got 24 hours, so if you think you're going to need to do it, it's a good idea to practice with them ahead of time. You need to be approved for what your outreach plan is in place. Both of those require the DEP regional staff to let you know that you're okay. And we do highly recommend that if you are required to do this, that you think about telling your story. There is required language, there's mandatory language, but you should tell your story. If you've got a newly minted lead service line replacement program, if, as one community did a couple of years ago, you've recently converted from a customer pays for the private side to it's free to the customer, tout that. Tell a good story as associated with this, and your press coverage may be beneficial rather than wholly negative. In addition to doing that 24-hour publication, reminder that you need to mail the notice to EPA at that web link that's there, and within 14 days, you need to post it as an advertisement in your local paper. All of those things are up with instructions at this link here. This is a pretty big deal. Make sure that you are prepped for it if you think there's any chance that you might be above. We'll talk more about this a little later in the presentation as the sampling and action level changes post 2027. It's more likely that you're going to need to deal with this.
So Steve, there's a question. Steve, there's a question in the chat.
Yep.
From Joan Roman. She's asking, can we tell our story in the notification, the required template?
Yes, you can. That's one way to do it. You can add additional language so long as you're not contradicting the materials that are in the template. Another way that folks have done it, City of Boston had to do this a year ago. They chose to do a press release on their changes to their lead service line replacement program, making it free, and they attached the public notice. So their story that showed up in the Boston Herald talked about the fact that levels were elevated, but it emphasized that there was this new program for free replacements. So think about, whether it's in the notice, which could be, it's going to be on your website, or whether it's part of a press release, can be both things. Anything that gets your story out there along with the required language works. You just can't contradict it. You can't say, they made me do it. It's not true. Here's the true story. Now, make sure you're not contradicting what's required. So, one of the things that we were successful at getting in the DEP template is to emphasize that that the higher lead levels in an action level exceedance may be related to lead service lines, and that replacement programs are an important part of the required and actions that the community has to take and the folks can participate with. And that's really because it is all about the lead service lines. We know that from our own data, and I'll talk a little bit about that right now. So we do know, this is not just at MWRA, but nationwide, that where lead service lines exist, they represent the largest source of lead in water. Makes sense. You've got 20, 30, 40 feet of lead that's in contact with water. There may be other lead within the building, solder joints or brass, but most of the time it's not going to be in contact with lead. That service line's a big load of lead. The new rules post 2027, but our communities here in Metro Boston have been practicing on this, require that we sample in homes with lead service lines. The new rule is going to require that we sample both the first and the fifth liter. I'll talk more about that in a minute. That's going to tend to drive lead results upwards. And as was already mentioned, that action level is going to drop from 15 to 10. So this is going to become a bigger deal. If you exceed the action level, your system needs to re-optimize corrosion control. So not only is it a big deal that you're going to have to do that 24-hour notice, but you're going to have to change your treatment potentially. So let's some data. Common sense says lead's the big service line's a big deal, but the data supports that. We looked at our data over the last few years. If you look at the full system on the first line, there's the 90th percentile that we presented for MWRA. If we looked at just the lead service lines in the second row, you can see that in every year, the lead service lines had higher results than the system as a whole. And then if you looked at just the homes that were copper with lead solder, you can see that they're not just lower, they are a lot lower. We know that new 5-bottle sampling is going to make the lead results higher. It doesn't change the actual lead, but it changes what we're reporting. That's going to be required starting in sampling in 2028. We have done some tests on this. We're thinking about educational materials to help customers figure out how to do a better job of this. But if you do have a lead service line, you're going to be sampling there. Here's how you're going to do it. Ultimately, we'll take the higher of that first or fifth. But here's typical sample result. You might have had a 7 in that first bottle coming out of the faucet, but the fifth was up at almost 20, and others were even higher. So we know the lead service line was contributing, and we know that with that fifth liter, you would have been above both the action level of 15 and the new action level of 10. So this is going to change how we think about our results. So one of the things EPA did include in the new rule that MWRA expects to try and take advantage of is an option to defer changes in corrosion control if we can get the lead service lines out quicker. So this option basically is accelerate your lead service lines, do it faster, get the public health benefits faster, and then you don't have to think about making changes. Why do we care about this? The most likely change to improve corrosion control for our system would be to add orthophosphate. We all know that phosphate is a pollutant. It's something we're trying to get out of our wastewater and our stormwater. Why would we put it in our drinking water? Plus, it introduces a number of other risks to the distribution system management, adding phosphates. We'd prefer to try not to do that if we can avoid it. The new rule allows that option if we can get all of the service lines replaced by 2032. So you'll hear throughout this presentation us talking about a goal of 2032. Quite frankly, any system may want to think about going faster, because not only do you defer that need for corrosion control changes, but you're generating the actual elimination of the problem, not just adding that other chemical to the water to help reduce it. Elimination is better than reduction. So there's just a time frame. We know that your inventories will be due in 2027. That's going to set your replacement rate. We'll be sampling starting in January of 2028 with all those new rules. Based on my data, if I was a betting person, I'd say there's a decent chance the MWRA system would be above in that first round of sampling, first half of 2028. That would then trigger that 5-year window. So our goal is to get all the service lines out by the end of that October 2032 deadline. So you'll hear more. What could prevent us from getting that 5-year accelerator replacement done? Well, we know that there's a fair number out there. We're waiting to get info from you on your inventories to update this number, but about 15,000 service lines have already been identified as lead, about 3% overall. Not a big number, but it's a big load to get rid of. We only get credit if you get rid of all those lead service lines and the galvanized requiring replacements. And the private side is the issue. If in fact you are paying for that private side, it's hard to get the customer to replace it. Could be $5,000 and $10,000 they have to pay. So we need to figure out how to deal with that. And Dave Granados, our new program manager in the lead service line replacement program, is going to talk about our changes to the lead program to make it easier to get your customers to participate. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you, Steve. Again, my name is David Granados. I am the new lead service line
David?
replacement.
Yeah.
Yes.
David, sorry, we're getting an echo on your mic there for some reason. It wasn't happening earlier when we tested.
How about now?
There you go.
Excellent. Okay. So again, thank you, Steve. My name is David Granados. I am the new lead service line replacement program manager at MWRA. Today, I'm excited to talk about an important topic: money. It's funny how just one letter can change a lot of things. We have evolved from the lead loan program, LLP, to the lead replacement program, LRP. And that shift represents our ongoing commitment to solving the lead issue. Just to give you some background on the lead loan program, this program was launched in 2016 with an initial pool of $100 million aimed at replacing lead service lines. The program offered 10-year interest-free loans with the condition that both the public and private portions of the service line had to be removed, regardless of who covered the cost of the private side removal. Eligible projects included the replacement of lead and brass service lines. To date, 17 communities have received $47.8 million, and MWRA communities have replaced over 7,900 lead service lines and 1,400 lead goosenecks using MWRA water program funds. This past summer, the board of directors authorized an exciting update, 25% grant option along with an additional $100 million for the lead replacement program. To qualify for the grant, communities must fully fund the replacement of both public and private portions of the service line. However, communities that don't cover that don't fully cover for the cost of the private site removal can still apply for the loan-only option, the 0% interest, which is still a pretty good deal. Eligible projects include lead service line replacements, investigations, those pesky unknowns that Claudia convinced us to prioritize, consulting services, which can be a lifesaver for stretch-thin teams, public education, like letters, filters, and much more. In essence, everything that's required to meet the regulatory standard. Now let's talk about numbers. We started with 100 million. We have spent about 44 million, and we just got another 100. That leaves us with $156 million available. Based on initial estimates, this should be more than enough to get the job done, removing all the lead service lines and resolving the unknowns. Next slide, please. Okay, so this sounds great, but how do you access the funds? The process is very familiar to those who have applied before. Communities submit an application to MWRA. Please make sure to include the most up-to-date inventory when you submit your applications. Applicants need an authorization through a vote, city council. Be sure to include language for grant eligibility on the votes. Sign the financial and loan agreements that one of us will prepare and send to you. Get a bond from bond council. And once that's done, the funds get deposited into the community's MMDT account. We are asking communities to set up a new MMDT account, and this is just for the first distribution, and then we'll reuse the same account. And then the funds are ready to be used. Next slide, please. Okay, this process sounds very straightforward, but how do I get the application? You can visit our newly updated website, MWRA.com, navigate to projects and programs, then major programs, and finally, lead service line replacement program. You'll find the application in a convenient Word document that you can just fill. We have guidelines and more important information on the website. But if you don't feel like going to the website, you can just reach out to me or Kristen, and we'll be happy to send you the application and respond any questions you might have. So here's our contact info. Next slide, please. Feel free to contact me anytime, starting next week. I'm currently on paternity leave, and we'll be back in the office on Monday. Thank you, and I look forward to working with you in this important initiative to get rid of all lead by 2032.
So just a couple of things that I'd like to hop in on. First off, thank you for sharing that picture, David. That's wonderful. Congratulations again, and we will after and for hopping on today despite everything going on in your house. So we appreciate it. We'll leave you alone until next week. And then the other thing I just wanted to give 2 seconds of credit for is this is just another good example of how the MWRA and the advisory board and the communities have really worked hard from the very beginning. 2016, after the FLIC crisis, was when the program started, and MWRA came to the table and said, maybe we need to try to help even more. And so kudos to you all for continuing to support our communities. Thank you so much.
And Dave, we don't want any more emails from you until Monday morning, please.
I'll
It's
try.
been hard to keep off the program site during the last few weeks. Congratulations, and enjoy the last few days of paternity leave.
Thank you.
So I've got a
we have one hand raised, Steve. Let me see if I can Joan, I'm gonna let you unmute.
Yeah, I just sent you a screen grab. I sat in on a Mass DEP presentation on this subject a couple of weeks ago, and they're saying that the lead line service replacement area says October 27, and then we have 10 years to replace. So this 2032 is the first time I heard it. So can you provide some clarification?
So what community are you from?
Arlington, Mass. I'm the public information officer.
So MWRA has been talking about the 2032 since February of this year, when EPA proposed the new rule, which include that option to defer changes to corrosion control if communities could do the lead service line replacement faster. It's part of the reason why we added the extra 25% grant to help encourage people to move more quickly. Our goal is to get it done because the alternative is to spend a fair amount of money, not just upfront for capital, but for ongoing operation forever with adding phosphate to the drinking water. So we're hoping that we can work with each and every community in the Carroll Treatment Plant service area, so Metro Boston communities, to accelerate and get done by 2032 rather than that 2037. We'll make ourselves available if you are interested in having us come meet with senior staff in any community, a mayor, board of selectmen, finance committee, public works board, whatever the appropriate decision makers are. We would be happy to come out, our senior staff, myself, Dave Granados, whomever, meet with you to talk about the new program, to talk about the goal, and to, tout why it's important to go quicker, not just to help the whole region, but also because getting rid of the lead service line sooner is better than later. I will mention a little later in the presentation that DEP, if you are getting any money out of the DEP program, they're trying to establish a 5-year goal starting when you get new money. So if you're using SRF for any program, they've already been talking about a 5 years from when you got the new money. We're talking about 5 years from 2027, or essentially 8 years from now. So hopefully that answers that question. And we would be happy to come out and talk in more detail with any community, yours or anybody else's, with that.
Thank you. No, that does. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm learning this. I've just been jumping on the last month, so thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, there had been a series of conversations earlier in the year on this, so I was, in the interest of time, just reiterating. But we can go into more detail. Feel free to give one of us a call, and we can go into more detail one-on-one. All right. So I want to talk about this next section of the presentation is really looking at the next several years towards planning for compliance with the new rule. EPA issued the lead and copper rule improvements just a few weeks ago. So we now know what the new requirements are. We know that for everything except the few things that we've already talked about, inventories, the letters going out, and the 24-hour notice, that all the rest of those things will happen starting at the end of 2027, October or January of 2028, depending on the requirement. So what can we be doing to prepare? And I'm going to frame this conversation as most of those things that EPA has required are essentially best practices for public health. They're good things that we should be doing. And so practicing now is going to help us be ready for compliance later. Okay, so first thing I'm going to mention is lead service line replacement plan. Many of you heard about this a few years back as part of our conversations around the lead and copper rule revisions, LCRR. When we thought we were going to need to do this plan by this October, EPA deferred it till the end of 2027, but who needs to do it? Every community that has any lead, galvanized requiring replacement, or lead status unknown service lines must submit by October of 2027, a lead service line replacement plan. If you are using SRS funds, DEP is actually requiring that you submit one as part of the application process. So everybody pretty much has something. I don't think we've run into too many systems so far that have been able to certify that they have no leads and no unknowns. So pretty much everybody's going to be doing this, definitely by 2027. But you should be thinking about all the requirements in it before then, because they're all good things that we should be working on. So what needs to be in that replacement plan? First off, your outreach approach. How are you going to communicate with customers to get them to participate? How are you resolving unknowns? Because that's going to adjust your replacement rate year by year as you update your inventory. What are the procedures in your community for that full service line replacement? How exactly are you going to do this? Are you using your own staff? Are you using contractors? Are you using a mixture of that? What's the mechanism for communicating with the customers? What's the mechanism for getting permission to go in their basement? All of that stuff, what's that procedure? How are you prioritizing replacements? As part of the LCRI improvements, EPA is requiring that the plan include a prioritization strategy. I'll come back to that in a minute or two. Needs to be documented how you're planning on doing that in this written plan that you will have to submit to DEP. your strategy, all your communication strategies. What are you going to be doing so many days before initiating a replacement to make sure your customers know what their role is in that? There's a bunch of new requirements for flushing and for filters for both disturbances and replacements that you need to be prepared to do, and need to be talking about that funding strategy. If you have folks who can't afford to do a replacement on their private property, what are you doing to make it easier? Are you going to use the MWRA money and make it for free? Or are you going to offer some other program, use some other grant from some other purpose to do that? You need to have that. It's required that you have that strategy in there. And then eventually you're going to need to have a plan for gooseneck replacement as you're doing other work. You don't need to commit to doing it as a specific separate task, but you need to do that anytime you're digging up the street and exposing one of them, you need to be replacing them. So that's all the stuff that needs to be in that replacement plan. What about prioritization? Well, basically it's, who are your sensitive populations? Who are your vulnerable populations? Who are your environmental justice or economically disadvantaged communities? And what are you doing to deal with that? Here's a pretty good list, a map that shows a good chunk of our service area in those environmental justice communities. What are you doing to make sure that those folks are prioritized both in outreach and in scheduling and in funding? Is essentially what your plan needs to deal with. When I look at this, I really want to be able to say, let's leave no one behind. We don't want to be in a situation where folks are in a situation where we would say, the rich, the well-to-do can get rid of their lead service lines, but the poor can't afford it. That's not a good place to be. It's not going to be a good place from a public relations standpoint. It's not a good place for dealing with the media, and it's just not a good place from a public service, public health perspective. So how are you going to deal with that?
Steve, we have a question in the chat. Karen Rave from BWSC asks, what if the homeowner refuses to replace the private side and the utility is covering the cost?
Good question. We don't have really detailed guidance for this, but the new rule does make it clear that if you've tried hard, and by hard they mean that you've tried multiple times, at least 4 times, to solicit their participation using at least 2 different methods. So that can be like a letter and a door knock, or a letter and a telephone call, a couple different ways to ensure that you're actually reaching somebody, and they still refuse, then you are excused from replacing that. Exactly how that fits into the get it all done metric, being finished, we need to get them to explain that in detail, but it is clear that you are not required to replace it if you cannot get access to the private property. There's going to be some real guidance around that, but there is some common sense process for exceptions where people don't play. However, I would say if you're not funding it and you can't get, and the customer says no, they don't want to do it, that might not be good enough. We'll have to see how EPA defines this in detail. The other thing that your priority setting should think about is how do you make your program.
I apologize, Steve. We do have another question in here as well. I lost my screen, but give me 1 second. Let me pull it up. Here it is. Is the EPA and DEP providing any guidance on how we are expected to collect 5 samples from our residents, given the significant challenges we face each year in obtaining even 1 sample, as most residents do not want to participate in the program? And will water department personnel be permitted to assist with taking these samples to improve compliance, considering that adding 4 more samples is likely to confuse residents further and deter participation?
Great question.
Nail that one.
we do anticipate that we will get some additional guidance. We are actually considering, there are some other utilities that already have YouTube videos up on how to do the sampling. We're thinking about generating a YouTube video. The bottles and the props are sitting in the corner of my office here, waiting for us to get a few minutes to generate that. It's going to add a little bit of complexity. In terms of customer assistance, you already can help the customer, but you've got to be able to get that first flush before the water's been used for at least 6 hours. So that does really make it hard to assist. We're thinking about doing a video. We're thinking about generating a mix of bottles. Maybe it's going to be one utility is using 2 regular bottles and 2 and 3 yellow bottles to different color, where you fill up all of them in sequence and just return the 2 that are the regular bottles. We got to work it through. This is a good reason to come help play with us. We are offering 5 bottle sequences in any sampling round for anybody who can get a volunteer and maybe get some feedback about what the customer thought was helpful. So yeah, we're going to work on that. We've got a few years before it's mandated, but we are experimenting. So back to priority setting. You want to run an efficient program. The last thing you want to do is have a program where you're doing one-offs and you're driving from end to end of the town. You want to think about how do you set priorities for your environmental justice communities, but also make it efficient. Do all the service lines on one street or all the service lines in a particular neighborhood. Combine it with work you're doing on the sewer side or work you're doing for street repaving. Think about practicality as well as that sort of environmental justice and merge the 2 things. Here's some good things in this list that you may want to think about. So I'm going to tick through things which will be required by 2027 and that you might want to practice on, because all of them represent some hurdles for management, process improvements internally. They represent hurdles for record keeping, which could get you in trouble. And practice makes perfect. Practice is going to improve our ability to comply. You don't want to wait till it's required to do this for the first time. So first thing I'll talk about is partial replacements. Partial replacements are generally prohibited. However, if you are doing a main replacement and the customer doesn't participate, you will be allowed to replace the portion on the private side because you're already going to be disturbing it. You might as well get it out to the curb stop. So in that case, there's a requirement for timing, 45 days advance notice, requirement that you provide additional notification, that you work with the customer to do flushing after the disturbance, that you provide a filter and some cartridges for 6 months, and that you offer to sample a few months later. So that's going to require that you've got a process in place, that you've got a record keeping, that you know that you did the notices and you can demonstrate that you've done the notices, that you provided the filter, that you did the follow-up sampling offer. All of those things, you're going to have like 4 or 5 touch points that you need to keep records on. Let's practice in advance in the next few years. Here's a kind of a schedule. If the owner replaces it, if the homeowner goes ahead and replaces theirs, let's say they have a leak, or if they're doing landscaping and for some reason they decide to do it before you replace your side, here's a little flow chart that I think Dave Granada's generated for me. Did you replace yours already? Document it. If you're going to replace yours after they replace theirs, you got 45 days, do it, document it. If you can't do it, let's say you're in the winter moratorium, you got to let the state know within 30 days, and then you still have to replace it within 180. Each one of those boxes represents a record you have to generate and keep for 12 years. So pay attention, practice.
Steve, there is a question in the chat. It says, does this start on January 1st, 2027?
These will start after October of 2027. And don't worry, we will be doing more training between now and then. So this is your first exposure to this. We'll give you additional training. I know there will be AWWA and resources, New England Waterworks and Mass Waterworks will probably be doing training as well as MWRA. Going to get lots of opportunities. This is your first opportunity to really be thinking about this. And I'm just encouraging you to think about it as practice. Even if you only do some of the things on these lists now, you're going to get that muscle memory going. You're going to get your record keeping going so that you're better prepared. Full replacement.
Just really sorry, Steve, just really quickly, just for those that may not be looking at the chat or are participating via phone, there's a little exchange back and forth. It looks like Waltham has noted that they give out an abatement to homes to get homeowners to participate in sampling. It looks like they do a $100 abatement. So throwing that out there in case that's something that communities or systems would like to consider.
Yep. The only thing I want to caution on that is don't make it too sweet or people will give you samples that don't comply. They want their $100, so they're going to give you any old bottle of water. You do need to make sure that you've done good training and stress the importance of proper sampling. Once you give us the bottle and it gets into the lab, we have to analyze it and we have to report the results, and you're stuck with them. So make sure folks are well prepared to do a good job. So if you do a full replacement, you don't want to leave any lead behind all the way from the main into the house. Some of the same things that I just talked about, you want to practice. You're going to notify the homeowner within 24 hours of the replacement. Ideally, you're going to do that before you turn the water back on. Let them know about those increased lead levels and the health effects of lead. Recommend some flushing that you do and that they do. Provide that filter, and then come back and offer them a sample 3 to 6 months later. Each one of those things, you need a record that you did it. You're able to prove that you did it, and you keep those records for 12 years. Did I get that right? Yeah, sorry. Replacement and disturbance actions. These, I'm going to go over this twice just because it's important. It's new, something we need to think about. If you do a minor disturbance, you do a test pit to find out if something's lead, and you find out that it is lead. If there's a loss of pressure because you're doing work in the street, you replace the curb stop, or you do something at the corporation, you need to provide that lead education and flushing info. If you do something more disturbance, replace the gooseneck, you're doing main replacement, so you're bending the lead service line and reattaching it. You're doing a meter replacement, so you know that you're banging around on the pipe. You need to not only do the education, you need to provide that certified filter. And finally, if you're doing a full or partial lead service line replacement, you need to do not only the information, the filter, but offer that sample 3 to 6 months later. Same information here. The only thing I want to add with this one, with this nice graphic, is that you need to come up with a mechanism to be communicating with your sewer side and with the electric and gas and cable utilities, that if they're digging in the street and they come across a lead service line, that they do something to mitigate the risk. At a minimum, that they're alerting you, and you can provide a letter, or maybe even that you're getting them to provide the letter themselves. Service line flushing, this is good stuff that you should already be doing. It's in the AWWA standard. Should be practicing that already. A number of communities I know are already doing it. If you replace a service line or a major disturbance, the system, that's you, need to flush the water from an outside connection, replace the meter, do a full velocity flush down in the basement for 10 minutes, then reconnect the meter. You want to get any disturbance of lead in anywhere that you can get out. And then you want to encourage the homeowner to basically start in the basement, open up all the faucets one after the other, cold water, flush the whole house out for 15 minutes, a half an hour, get it done, and then turn them all off, replace the aerators. Do that right after replacement, do it every couple of weeks for several months. And of course, anytime that their water's been sat stagnant, to do a flush. This is because there typically is lead in the pipe in the home, and that lead is going to continue to mobilize after you've replaced the service line, and there can be elevated levels for at least a couple of months. We want to minimize that risk.
Steve, I apologize if you
no
already covered this, but there was a question in the chat. What if other utilities do work or cause disturbance? Not sure if there was any more on that you kind of wanted to.
And there's no mandate that you do something. There's a recommendation or an encouragement by EPA and from DEP that you work out some system to provide homeowners with information, whether it's the other utility that's providing that or whether you're getting notification and doing it. Again, it's good public health practice is what we're talking about here. It's not a regulatory mandate in that case, but if the lead levels are going to go up because the sewer guys dug a trench and they banged on the lead service line while they were doing it, let's let the homeowner know that the lead levels may be increased. You may want to work out. I know there are utilities that already have in every contract that if they have sewer work or water work, that they already include a service line replacement line item, cost line item, so that contractor, if they dig a trench and it come across a lead service line, can replace it, and that they include dealing with the customer on the private side. Think creatively about how to get the problem solved, whether it's that temporary increase in doing flushing and filters, a notification, or whether it is a permanent replacement as part of that project.
So just to clarify, Steve, that was in reference to other utilities like a gas company. I'm not sure if there's anything else.
Yeah. So again, it's not a mandate, but it's a good practice. If the gas company does something, you should be either asking them. Now, we're all going to be asking the gas company to do this, so maybe we can convince them to make it part of their practice. But at a minimum, between your permitting of work in the street and coordination, if they run across a lead service line, maybe they let you know and you do something. Again, best practice, not a mandate. Okay, I've only got a couple more slides that we want to think about here. Continue work on school and childcare sampling. We do this as part of our lead and copper rule sampling now. There is a new mandate that'll start in 2027 that you do for daycares and elementary schools, everything but the high schools basically, that you offer sampling on a 5-year schedule, first 5 years, 20% per year, for schools to do 5 samples, childcare facilities to do 2 samples. You can get ahead of this. You can get some of this done in advance. DEP will give you credit for any work done from 2021 onwards that meets those requirements, the 5 samples or 2 samples. So if you're doing a whole school sample with your school department, let's get it documented and get you credit for that legacy sampling ahead of time. So some systems I know are already working on this. MWRA will continue to do laboratory analysis for any MWRA water community as part of the rates you're already paying us. So collaborate with us, give us a call if you're thinking about doing school sampling. Let's make sure that that school sampling meets the new requirements and you can get a check off for that school and not have to worry about it later. So as I've already said, for the next 3 years, all these requirements are just best practice. But they're going to be required, so consider implementing them early. Get those documentation processes developed. This is, as I'll talk about from some audits, documentation is an easy way to get a violation notice from the state. And the more you practice, the safer your customers' water will be, and the better your ability to comply when it becomes a mandate will be. So practice makes perfect. Practice makes better compliance. Want to talk a tiny bit about lessons we've learned from EPA audits. A number of communities have had EPA come in and do a lead and copper rule audit. I'd say the 2 biggest issues have been around sampling plans, primarily where communities were saying that something was a lead service line, calling it a tier 1A, and in fact, it either never was or it had been replaced and they didn't fix the sampling plan. So our advice to you is, if your plan says it's a lead service line, verify that it is. And if you realize after you're starting your sampling that it turns out that you're at a home where the lead service line replacement has been done, put that bottle aside and use an alternate site. If you submit that sample and it's in your sampling plan as a lead service line, you're likely to get a violation notice. And communities have already had that happen. So record keeping is the other Achilles heel. If you fail to meet reporting deadlines, or if you're unable to prove that you met a reporting deadline, you will get a violation. So you need to keep track of when you got data, when you found a lead service line, and what actions were required, when they're required, and when you did them. That's going to be more important in the future. You need to develop those sort of contemporaneous records for each step and get them in some sort of system. So if somebody comes to audit, you can pull them back out of your files, and that's up to 12 years. So it can't simply be that, Joe, who's in charge of it, could do it. When Joe retires, somebody else has to be able to find that. I will say, if you're sending out letters, make sure they have dates on them and that they're in your file. If you're making phone calls, make sure there's a record, an email in your file, or a paper record that records that you made the call, who you spoke to, and what the date was. Violations for record keeping, and just a stupid way to get a violation. It's a stupid way to reduce customer confidence in your ability to get things done. And so we've been answering questions as we've gone along, but Lisa Bina is going to give us a Q&A session on the entirety of our program. And we're also going to have some questions after that you have to answer, and then one more presentation before we
Right,
let you out
so-
the door.
I mean, a lot of information was presented here and it was covering, it's great. And it was great that people were able to ask questions as the presentations were presented. But does anyone else have any questions? I am curious about one thing, because I noticed some people responded that they actually have to do test pits to determine the lead service. And that's definitely, it's a staffing, it might become a staffing issue. The communities that have had to do the test pits, is it just a handful of test pits, or are you talking about you have like a year's worth of test pits that need to be done to determine the material?
Mhm. Somebody wants to unmute themselves and jump in.
Lisa, how you doing?
Good. Yeah. Hi, Chris.
So down in the city of Revere, we had a large number of test pits to complete, and we still have. We're actually getting some funding from the EPA to do, I think it's 431 test pits for our community.
Oh, wow.
They're contributing a little bit to help us out, but I don't know, Anthony, you want to jump on? Do you know the actual number of test pits? I think we did a little over 300 this year just to stay in compliance.
Now,
Yeah.
how do you do that with your own staff? Are you able to hire out? I'm
It
assuming
was
you.
very, very difficult, but our own staff kind of
Really?
they took care of it. They did a great job.
Yeah, test pits are the gold standard, particularly for the public side. You can do a private side inspection in the basement, and you can determine if it's copper or lead, and be pretty confident. On the public side, you got to get eyes on the pipe. Unfortunately, EPA considers that the gold standard. So if you don't have a record, you probably sooner or later have to do a test pit.
Yeah.
And we haven't talked about the fact that there's a whole verification requirement that's going to be required in the 7 years after 2027 to confirm that, in fact, that what your records told you is true. So we're waiting for more guidance on that. But yeah, if you want to invest in something, vacuum excavation trucks, good place to put your money.
Yeah,
Right.
that was one of my questions, real quick. So I know after we certify that we're lead free, we will have to go back and recertify. Is there any idea of what that will entail? Like ones that haven't been test pitted, you will have to test pit, or is there some other procedure? I know they don't allow you to use that silverfish thing, whatever it is that.
Swordfish, yeah. So we're waiting for really detailed guidance on this. But the guidance we've seen, the language that's in the regulation makes it pretty clear that what they'll be talking at is a statistical sample of your services. So there'll be somewhere between a small number and several hundred that a utility will need to confirm with visual inspection. So on the public side, that will mean a test pit that was in fact, if you declared it non-lead, that you have a visual inspection. How we deal with, so that's going to primarily be for things that you haven't already laid eyes on. So if you use the paper record or you use some other statistical tool, AI tool, machine learning to determine that it was not lead, you're going to need to verify a statistical sample of those. That's how we understand it. I'm waiting for a detailed, guidance manual on that, but it does entail real money and real effort, particularly for the larger, the sort of mid and larger utilities. I'm sure we're going to do a whole 2-hour training on just that at some point in the next couple of years.
We do have some questions in the chat. Are you able to see them, Lisa? Or do you want me to
Yeah, you can
read them
go
out?
over them though.
Cool. It says in Medford, we have a high number of unknowns. We are doing 618 now and more to do. That was, I think, more of a comment than anything else. And then the next one here is the requirement for sampling schools and childcare facilities 20% a year to provide the offer to sample as opposed to actually getting participation in collecting the samples?
Correct. It is offer to sample. You can't make the school or child care sample. You need, again, it'll be a documentation war, You're going to demonstrate that you in fact did get something to them. So we're going to probably suggest, certified letters to childcare facilities and, and a definitive recorded conversation of some sort with your school department on the schools.
And then
if they don't say yes or they do say no, in other words, if you don't get a response or if you get a definitive no, you get to check it off that you're done with them.
And then it says in here that Concord has about 120 test pits to confirm unknowns in the right-of-way between 1940 to 1988, most likely not lead, to be performed in-house with Vector over the next year.
Yeah.
Just
yeah.
answering to Lisa's original. Oh, and Chris is writing in here for planning and budgeting. Should all MWRA communities plan on a 20% removal rate when the LCRI comes into effect?
Everybody in the Metro Boston area who is downstream of the Carroll, served by the Carroll treatment plant, that's our goal. So yes, 20% per year, finished by 2032. The more you get done early, the more we get to spread it out. So if you're not in Metro Boston, if you're a CVA community, your own pace. But I will say EPA and DEP are both pushing as soon as possible. So don't say, I've got 25 of them, I'm going to do 2 or 3 a year for the next, 10 years. Let's get them done right away. And remember, you're going to have to mail each of those folks a letter every year telling them that you're poisoning them, pretty much what the letter says. So getting it done sooner is going to get better customer satisfaction as well as removing that public health risk.
Another question is, will it be 5 samples per school up from 2 samples?
Yes, it's 5 samples, and we're waiting for some additional back and forth between the state and feds on this. The federal rule actually specifies, it's like, if I'm remembering it right, it's 2 fountains, 2 faucets, and a kitchen or something like that. It's actually more specific than just 5 samples. However, I think that if you did all taps in a school last year or next year, that will clearly qualify. So we are still seeing communities which are doing all school or all potable faucet, no slop sinks, no wash sinks, but all the places where people might get drinking water, that should qualify you for grandfathering in.
Okay.
Another question is, will schools be first draw or the 1 to 5 liters?
Schools are the same as they are now. It's first draw sample, and if you're doing sometimes we also do the 2 bottle sample for if you're working on a public health basis, we'll do 2 samples, but they're first draw, stagnant water.
All right. So we're
Yeah.
just a little over 11:30 right now, and we do have a couple slides because we do have a WIA coming up again. And Michael O'Keefe is with us, who's the Senior Program Manager in the Planning Department. That's just going to do a quick review of it. Michael?
Hi, everyone. So we just, like Lisa said, we wanted to briefly remind you all that the deadlines for updates to the American Water Infrastructure Act materials are coming up. You can go to the next slide. So it seems like not too long ago that we all certified compliance with the WIA back in 2020, but we need to recertify again in 2025. And as a reminder, there are 2 sets of materials. There's the risk and resilience assessments, which detail the risks to your systems to malevolent acts and natural hazards. And there's also the emergency response plans that detail strategies and projects to improve resilience and also your procedures that you have in place to respond to any emergency. So while a WIA doesn't require submission of specific documents, just certification, it's important to have these materials ready in case EPA does conduct an audit and they have before using a WIA.
Okay.
And then just,
yeah, I was just going to say the deadline. So again, they're based on population. So your risk and resilience assessments are due at the end of March 2025 for systems over 100,000, like you see there, and then due at the end of December 2025 if your population is between 50,000 and 100,000, and then not until June 30th of 2026 if your population is between 3,000 and 50,000. And again, then emergency response plans are submitted and not submitted, but recertified 6 months after that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and we did. I'll add that it would be great. So it'd be great if we could help DEP and us get 100% compliance by the deadlines. Some of you know that I did offer nagging questions 1 to 3 weeks after the deadlines last time. I don't think that we will get quite as much leeway this time. The rumor out of Washington, D.C. is that EPA does intend to do enforcement. So the day after the deadline, the state that they will be checking if you have it submitted on time, they'll be issuing violation notices. So less leeway this round than last.
All right. I just want to remind everyone to make sure they put their name and email into the chat to make sure you receive your TCHs. And like Matt said, we are going to be posting these slides on the advisory board website, which has everyone's contact information and some great links. So we have to do the questions now before you go. So next slide. Okay. Which one of these is required to get a letter with risk information? A, building with lead service lines. B, buildings with galvanized service lines requiring replacement. C, buildings where one or both sides of the service line are unknown materials, or all of the above. You can just put your answer in the chat.
Got tons of D's.
Tons of what?
D's.
D's. Okay, good. All right, that's the answer. Thank you. Next slide. Who should be receiving letters based on the service line inventory? A, bill paying customers. B, all residents served by that service line. C, landlords for posting. Or D, all the above.
Still coming in. Give everybody a chance.
Yep.
Again, lots of D's.
Maybe watching the chat,
Yep.
It's like jumping all over the place while people are answering.
I know you can't see the answer, so Matt's doing that part. So yes, D's correct. Okay, number 3. When are the letters to customers and residents due? A, October 16, 2027. B, January 1st, 2025. C, November 15th, 2024. And D, what letters?
And C is the winner on this one.
Yes, it's C, and it's coming up quickly. So it's probably been a busy year getting everything ready. So next question.
To get this all done, then you can respond to customers between the 15th and Thanksgiving.
I know it's almost like right back to back.
Yeah, take the Thursday for Thanksgiving off.
Right.
All right. What is the MWRA recommended goal for completing LSL replacement, lead service line replacement? A, October 2027. B, end of 2032. C, October 2037, or as soon as possible, but no later than 2032.
That one was a bit all over the place at first, but now we've got D's coming in.
Yeah, it's D. It as soon as possible, but no later than the 2032.
And again,
because you
that's
don't want,
really
just to be able to do, as you go. So. And
that's toward Steve's point about the goal is to try to avoid having to introduce orthophosphates into the MWRAs.
So we went a little over, but close, and had some great questions. Went over a lot of information. So thank you for joining. Yeah. And we have all the contact information.
And the last thing I will say, because I'm more of a communications hack than I am a water person, really, is I would also very much encourage you to include your elected officials in your pre-buttles, because they're the ones that are going to be fielding the phone calls from scared residents. So make sure that they're aware ahead of time before they even get to you, because otherwise you're going to have a worse Thanksgiving.
There is a poll from the advisory board staff that's gone up on on your screen, and with some questions for them to figure out next new opportunities, new
Thanks for tuning in to ABTV. Catch our next episode for more insights on water and wastewater topics. Remember, the full video version of this workshop is available on YouTube, and you can find links to additional resources in the show notes. If you're watching the video, just scan the QR code to access all our social media and show notes on our website.